Hey there, welcome back to my channel Code Canvas. In this video, we will discuss about 5 CSS practices that you should avoid as a web developer. Sometimes writing the CSS is easy, but you should keep in mind that writing some CSS classes and properties is very crucial. There are few properties available in CSS which you should avoid and you can use best practices instead of them. So let's get started. First point is setting margins and padding and then reset them. So sometimes I have seen people set margins or padding for all the elements and then reset them for the first or last element. So I don't know why they use those two rules when you can do this by only one. It's very easier to set margins and padding for all the required elements at once. You can use nth child, nth of type, not, or adjacent sibling combinator for that. Okay, so what I mean in CSS, let's say I have one class called item, okay, and margin right one rem, for example. This is one CSS class I have written, and item last child margin right 0. So this is bad practice. You should not do this. Okay. Instead of this, what you can do? You can simply write item not last child and margin right one area. So instead of writing two classes, you can combine them using this not and last child. This is both are same. Okay, so this is the one rule that you should avoid. This is very common. So you can use this method instead of this one. Okay. What you can else do with that? You can also write down like item nth child and n plus 2. Okay. And margin right one area. So this is also a very good way. There is also one way like item adjacent sibling combinator item and margin right one area, right? So this is also a very good way, but you should avoid writing this type of CSS. Okay, so second point is, let's see, second point is add display block for elements with position absolute or position fixed. So, did you know that you don't need to add display block for elements with position absolute or position fixed because it happens by default, right? Also, if you use inline values, they will change the values inline or inline block to block, inline flags, flags, inline grid, grid, and inline table to table. So just write position absolute or position fixed and add display only when you need flex or grid values. So what exactly I mean, let me add comment. This is bad. When you write down button class and before, okay, content is empty, position absolute and display block. You should avoid this. This is not a good practice. Instead of, not instead of, we can show another thing. Before, button before, content empty, position fixed. Okay, and again display block. So this is not a good practice. Instead of, what you can write, you can write button before, content empty, and position absolute. You don't need display block. default display is blocked, right? Also, you can write button before content empty and position fixed. This is also valid, but you should avoid this, right? So this is another example that you should avoid as a CSS web developer. The third point is you should use other properties and CSS instead of using transform translate -50% -50% to center the element. Third one. Okay, so there was a popular problem that used to cause a lot of trouble. Okay, and later until 2015, all solutions lead to some kind of difficulties. So I'm talking about centering an element with an arbitrary height along two axes, right? So in particular, one solution was to use a combination of absolute positioning and transform property. These techniques cause blurry text issues in Chrome-based browsers, right? But after the introduction of Flashbox, this technique, in my opinion, is no longer relevant. The thing is that it cannot solve the problem of blurry text. What's more, it makes you to use five properties. So I would like to share a trick that can reduce the code to two properties. Right. So let's see the bad practice first. Okay. So let's say we have one parent element, parent class, and position is relative. Okay. And we have one child that we want to make it center aligned. Position is absolute, right? But we will write top 50%, left percent, transform, translate -50%, -50%. So this will make child the center of this parent element, right? So instead of using this trick, what you can do here, you can write down parent as display flex, right? And child as margin auto. This will make this element in a center of this parent. So as you can see, it is reduced to two lines instead of these four lines. So this is a very good practice when you want to make your element in a center, right? Okay. The next one is use width 100% for block elements. This is also a bad practice. We often use Flexbox to create a multi-column grid that gradually converts to a single column, right? And to convert the grid to one column, some developers use width 100%. So I don't understand why they do it. The grid elements are block elements that can do this by default without using additional properties. So we don't need to use width 100%, but rather we should write the media queries. So the Flexbox is only used to create a multi-column grid. So let me show you with example. Let's say in HTML we have div with class parent. Okay, here again we have div class child item one, and let's copy this item to four times. Item four, item three, item two. Okay, so let's see the bad practice. So in CSS, what generally people do, display flex and flex wrap. Okay, for child, what they do with 100% and media query in width to 1024 pixel, and here we again write child width to 25%. So this is normally what CSS developers do. But instead of writing this, what we can do, this is a bad practice. Let's write down some good code. Here, what we can do, we can write down a media query, right? In media query, you can write down min width, whatever we want. For example, 1024 pixel, little bit uh, slow. Yeah. So 1024 pixel. Here, parent, we should write down display flex as before. Flex rep is rep. This is fine. And child, simply write width 25%, because this child width 100% is by default. You do not need to mention that, but you can always use child 25% in the media query when minimum width is 1024. So here it is a very good example that you should avoid as a CSS developer. Okay. The next one is set display block for flex items. So when using the flex box, it is important to remember that when you create a flex container like add display flex, all children flex items become blockified. Right. This means that the elements are set to display and can only have block values. Accordingly, if you set inline or inline block, it will change to block, inline flex to flex, inline grid to grid, and inline table to table. So don't add display block to flex items. The browser will do it for you. So what I mean, bad practice, we have parent div, which is display flex. Okay, and one child div, which is display block. So this is bad. You do not write. You do not need to write like this. Okay. What is good practice here? As a parent, display flex and child display block you can avoid, because by default display block is also there in a child element. Right. So you do not need to write down the additional CSS for that. Display block is a default property when the parent is display flex. So I hope I have managed to show you how to avoid simple mistakes, and I hope you use this practice in your daily development. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe and keep supporting. That's all for this video. See you next time around. Thank you.